千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. So, this idea is something that can take a little getting used to. What I would like to do is to share a story with everybody and then use that story to illustrate the point. The story is called The Prayer. Once upon a time, in ancient China, the emperor told his ministers that he wished to visit a temple to offer prayers to the Buddha. One of the ministers, who was adept at flattery, said, "Oh, your majesty does not need to visit the temple." "Is that so?" The emperor was surprised at being contradicted. "Why not?" The minister bowed. He said, "The essence of the Buddha is the compassionate heart. Your majesty is constantly worried about the common people out of pure compassion. Therefore, your majesty is already a living Buddha. Therefore, your majesty, you do not need to visit the temple." "Interesting," said the emperor. "That reminds me of a story. Let me share it with you. It goes like this. Once there was a devout Buddhist who had only one wish in his life, and that was to see the Guanyin Bodhisattva. He traveled to many places and studied many sutras, looking for a way to find her. After years of effort, he finally succeeded. At a holy place far from home, the Bodhisattva appeared before him in a blaze of heavenly glory. He fell to his knees in awe. Guanyin asked him, "Why have you come such a long way to look for me?" The man said, "Merciful Guanyin, I only wish to ask you a question." "Very well," Guanyin said. "Go ahead and ask." The man said, "When I am in trouble, I pray to you and ask you for help. Do you also pray when you feel troubled?" "Yes," Guanyin replied. The man said, "To whom do you pray?" Guanyin replied, "I pray to the Guanyin Bodhisattva." "But you are the Guanyin Bodhisattva. Why do you pray to yourself?" Guanyin said, "Because it is far better to ask yourself for help than to ask someone else." Guanyin smiled and then disappeared in a blaze of heavenly glory. The emperor said to his ministers, "What I have learned from the story I just told you is that the Buddha lives in the heart. When we go to the temple to pray, we are in fact praying to ourselves and asking ourselves for help. That is why I shall override your objection and proceed to the temple today." The end. So this story is about prayer. With this story, the first thing that I want to bring to your attention is that there are more ways to think about prayer than what we usually see. Typically, the most common understanding of prayers is to request divine assistance externally from an external source. Please help me. I'll be good if you help me. We typically see that. So the emperor highlights the alternative, which is similar to the common expression we're all very familiar with. God helps those who help themselves. This is the level beyond the most common. It's the level where one begins to see the reasons for requesting self-assistance directed internally, directly toward oneself. In that mode of thinking, the prayer becomes a way for oneself to focus on the problem and think about the things you can do to work toward solution. So we're using different words, but we're saying the same thing. Praying to oneself or to the Buddha within is similar to Tao cultivators staying on the path. And when we pray to the Buddha or the Guanyin Bodhisattva, it is about compassion. It is about learning to be compassionate. Therefore, praying to the Buddha is learning from the Buddha to become more like the Buddha as a self-reminder. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. There's more than the typical way of thinking about prayers. And when we talk about staying on the path, this is the similar approach for Tao cultivators by making use of that metaphor, walking the path through the forest. It's about being self-sufficient, which can become important because we all know there's going to be times when help is not necessarily available. We've all heard about or experienced firsthand the times when there's no cell signal while hiking in the woods. We're all familiar with that. And the consequence of thinking about prayers this way is that when you direct that problem, remember, God helps those who help themselves. When you direct that request internally, then assistance is assured. And when you travel on the path and stay on the path, the protection is a natural trait of the path itself. For the emperor, the main point is that prayers to a deity may, for whatever reason, go unanswered. But the same prayer directed to oneself will definitely not go unnoticed. Doing something about it is entirely up to you. For the Tao cultivator, the main point is that staying on the path is a measure of protection from the dangers of the forest. To stay on the path, the decision to do that is entirely up to you. So the emphasis is on you. This story comes from the book, The Tao of Success, The 5 Ancient Rings of Destiny. And I think it's a good way to help us understand the words of Lao Tzu speaking about the Tao. Listen to it, it cannot be heard. It is called noiseless. To kind of help us summarize everything and connect it back to the Tao Te Ching, let me present you with this slide about the Tao cannot be heard. To the left, we have religion. Pray to a deity for protection from dangers encountered in life. Now, the Tao concept is different because the Tao cannot be heard. It is silent. If you talk to it, it doesn't talk back to you. So this will be a departure from religious practices or prayers or conversations. So the path. The path itself protects travelers from the dangers of the wilderness. As I mentioned in the previous slide, that is the primary purpose of clearing a path through the forest in the first place. The path is meant to be the safer, faster, and easier way than you working your way through an unexplored forest. Secondly, on the religion side, prayers can be transactional, the promise of good behavior for divine assistance. And we all know this. We know how prayers can take on that transactional tone. You're asking for something. You offer something in exchange, like good behavior. And you assume the deity agrees to the deal in a rather one-sided way. On the Tao side, it isn't that. There's no need to promise anything. You just want to make sure that you don't wander off the path and unwittingly put yourself in danger. Now, we do have different levels in the study of the Tao. In the basic levels, people still pray to deities for protection. And the reason is simple. It is what people know and feel comfortable with. Prayers focus the mind, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of human nature. And in the basic levels of Tao study, people do definitely stray from the path because of curiosity. It is also part of human nature. So that is the basic level. In the advanced higher levels of understanding, you gain more clarity about existence. You begin to understand that following the Tao provides protection to you naturally. You don't have to do anything special. You just have to follow the path, just like you're putting one step before the other in the woods. In other words, you're naturally protected just by staying on the path and following the path. So from that perspective, it isn't that prayers are bad. It's just that they are more for your own good. They are not absolutely necessary. Let's go ahead and make those points. For religion, when you are in the mode of prayers, you then wait for, typically people wait for some kind of sign. Will the deity come to your aid or not? You hope for some sort of divine intervention to arrive as soon as possible. In the Tao context, it's different because there's no need to wait or hope for anything. You just continue down the road. And I have a couple of graphical depictions here, one for praying, one for following a path in the woods. With the graphics representing the two different approaches to life and spirituality, one can see the prayer side is more passive by comparison. And the path metaphor feels more active. This is only natural because prayers are more of a contemplation. In a prayer, one's attention is mostly in the mind, where the prayer takes place. Traversing the path implies continuous action, one foot in front of the other. One's attention is mostly with the environment, just observing and reacting. So the feeling is different. But all of these are different ways, that different levels of understanding that we can extract from the simple lines provided to us from Lao Tzu. But we have definitely talked a lot about this particular chapter 14 today. I want to make sure that we all review a summary of it as a reminder for ourselves in the weeks to come. So the summary here is titled The Tao and Cultivators. This is because when we talk about the characteristics of the Tao, we also have to talk about emulating the Tao, which is what sages do and what Tao cultivators do and what we should all do. First of all, what is the Tao? Again, using the path as the metaphor, the Tao is the best way to live one's life. It is not an object, it is not a deity. What we have talked about is philosophy for living life rather than a religious practice. So in describing the Tao, Lao Tzu says, the Tao is not visible. It can be understood, just like an equation can be understood, but the principle described by the equation itself is unseen. In the same way, we can write a lot about the Tao, but the words are not the Tao. The Tao itself is unseen. It is not seen. So then we need to extend from there to think about what it means for us to emulate the unseen, not visible Tao. From the Tao perspective, this is reflected in the Tao teachings. Lao Tzu has written at length about this over multiple chapters. Tao sages teach it. Tao masters talk about this all the time. Tao cultivators should feel no need to be highly visible. Emulate the Tao that is unseen. If the Tao cultivators have been seen by others, not a big deal. It's just that the wise Tao sage would never make an attempt to become especially visible, because that would be reflective of an ego that can be out of control. Next, the Tao is silent. The Tao is something that we can experience. You can feel it deep within, but the Tao is not heard. So today we talk quite a bit about how the Tao is not a deity, therefore it's not in a position to answer prayers. It doesn't have conversations with you. It can definitely cause you to have feelings when you tap into it. It can definitely provide you with an endless stream of ideas. But it doesn't say anything. That's the main point. Therefore, when we emulate this wisdom of the Tao, just like the Tao sages and Tao cultivators, we ourselves should also feel no need to be verbose. That is to say, we learn the wisdom of saying more with less words. That we don't always need to be a chatterbox. That sometimes it's better to remain quiet or silent. Either way, there's no need to talk a whole lot. to be verbose. Lastly, the Tao is formless. The Tao can be felt in your heart, but it cannot be touched. It cannot be taken. It cannot be held. So, taking a cue from this, what it means for us, just like it is for Tao sages and cultivators, is that we detach from things, from material objects. We recognize the importance of resources in life, which can definitely be material in nature. But we also recognize that there's a point beyond which the acquisition of additional material resources diminishes in meaning. It's just like when you hear people ask the question, well, gosh, how many millions of dollars can you actually use up in this lifetime? There is a point of diminishing returns, and even before that, there is a real danger in becoming overzealous in the pursuit of material things. That is what leads to the misfortunes that Lao Tzu talked about in Tao Te Ching 13. So, in contemplating the Tao not being visible, being silent and formless, I hope everybody would also take a moment to reflect on how can we, you and I, become more like the Tao? Can we refrain from showing off, flaunting, showcasing the self? Can we refrain from talking too much? And can we refrain from becoming too desirous of material things? Those are the summaries for today. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.